Welcome back to another episode of House to Home. My name is Grace Youngson, and I'm here, as always, with Joseph Kohm. This podcast is a podcast produced by Family Policy Alliance Foundation. And today, we're actually going to be talking about Joseph's recent event that he attended with the Federal Trade Commission and all the implications of that. Joseph, would you tell us a little bit more about this?
I would love to, Grace. Great to be back on the show with you as always, and thank you for that good introduction. Yes, we're going to talk about this event. At the time of recording, I'm only 2 days away from. FPA was invited, or I was invited to represent FPA at an event put on by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, which is an executive body in the government, and its design is to protect citizens and consumers from unfair trade practices. So they wanted to hold an event on the way big tech and other similar companies are taking advantage of parents and families. So the event was on June 4th, 2025. That was a Wednesday, so just a couple days ago at the time of recording. And the event was called The Attention Economy, How Big Tech Firms Exploit Children and Hurt Families. So you can kind of see the at least initial theme coming out of there, but there was a lot to talk about, and I was invited to participate on a panel and talk about FPA's work through our Let Parents Parent campaign to better protect children and families online through good policy, particularly through the use of mandatory age verification requirements when it comes to exposure to online pornography or social media or predatory app stores. So that was my role in it, and it was a great day.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I think it's so great that those issues are actually being brought up at the Federal Trade Commission event. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this podcast.
Yeah, same here. I'm also like you, Grace. I'm grateful that the FTC was taking this event so seriously. Even when I just walked into the FTC that morning for a long day, I was just struck that we had the chairman there. We had two of the commissioners. It was clear that they really take their duty to protect consumers online, particularly families, the most vulnerable consumers, so seriously. And that was really encouraging. That was what I first thought when I walked in there. So, Grace, you've kind of followed this event from afar. Like, what have you thought from what you've heard about it so far?
Yeah, well, I think the online world really is the number one influencer today, especially among young people. And so I think this is really a top issue that we have to give our attention to. And it's great to see that the FTC is giving their attention to it, because I really think that what we allow young people to be exposed to online can have the power to determine the future of the nation. So I think this is really important. And yeah, it's so cool that we get to have a conversation with you being in attendance in person at this event. So
Yeah, maybe I'll just dive in deeper real quick and do just a little bit of overview, and then we can talk more specifics about at least what FPA's involvement was and what I spoke about. Um,
sounds good.
so, so the FTC really wanted to cover the gamut, at least in terms of not just policy, but a holistic approach to this. And so it was a long day. I will preface everyone, it was a long event, but it was a good event. There were 4 distinct panels, and we had allies on almost all of them, Grace, which was really a thrill. It was a lot of people that FPA and FPAF have worked with on this issue. The first panel was just establishing the fact that kids are in danger online. Our dear friend and ally, Michael Toscano of the Institute for Family Studies, spoke really eloquently on that panel with some others. Then there was a panel just generally talking about what the FTC itself can do to protect kids online. That was really enlightening. We had some friends from the Heritage Foundation there. Then my panel spoke after lunch, where our main approach was the policy side, and particularly the use of age verification requirements to protect families from different things online. And then the final panel was called What Could Be Done Outside of Washington? And this one was really fun, and I'm glad they saved it for last, because it was all about practical things that everyday citizens and particularly families can do. So the main panelist on it was another great FPA ally named Claire Morell. She's a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and she's just released a new book that is excellent on this subject called The Tech Exit, a practical guide towards having a smartphone-free childhood for families. So there might be more on that to come. Claire's a great friend, and we support her in her book. But it's an excellent book, and she talked in detail about that before the day was over. And intermixed in all that, we had remarks from the FTC chairman, Andrew Ferguson. We had remarks from not one, but two senators, Senator Marsha Blackburn and Senator Katie Britt stopped by. They gave some great remarks, particularly in favor of the federal legislation involved. And then we had closing remarks from FTC Commissioner Mark Meador from the FTC itself, which was an excellent, excellent speech. So overall, it was a great day. You could tell just from that, it was pretty broad strokes, pretty holistic approach to the problem.
Yeah, it sounds like a very full day for sure. I know we've talked a little bit about the age verification software on the podcast before. I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about that final panel and some of the practical ways that parents can help protect their kids. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Grace, all the credit really goes to Claire just because she's such an eloquent, articulate advocate for just very practical steps for families. I want to emphasize to our audience, her book really is terrific. And if you haven't gone to buy it, I would encourage you all to do it. Claire is also a great follow on social media. She's on all the major platforms. Claire Morell, last name is spelled Morell. Highly recommend her. But she also had a great co-panelist who was Dr. Matthew Meehan. He's the Associate Dean of the Hillsdale School of Government, DC campus there. And he's so passionate about these issue areas that he told me afterwards that this event actually pulled him out of his sabbatical, which I really empathize with, because if you know anything about academics, you know sabbaticals are coveted things. So I really appreciated Dr. Meehan, and he and I had some good conversations afterwards. But he brought a very ethical, philosophical, and American history approach to this question about what it takes to form virtue in kids and in people, and how at least too much of any particular technology really is not conducive to that end. So I really appreciated them both, and was very refreshing. A great practical, conceptual, and a great practical end to the day.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I love the what you hit on there with, raising kids according to virtue and according to morals. And I think that for parents listening, and I know one thing that I'm grateful that my parents did for me is definitely raise me with some clear core values that really helped me make good decisions for my life, because I wasn't wondering what I believed. And I think that one of the risks with social media is when you start, being on that constantly. I mean, the stats are crazy. Like, young people are spending most of their lives on their phones. And so you're having all these voices coming at you and all these different moral values, core values, virtues. And so I think one big thing that parents can definitely do, because you can't deny that your kids will be exposed to some of this stuff, is make sure that you help create those solid core values in them. So I love that you touched on that, and that was touched on in the panel. I think that's so important. I would love to hear more about the panel that you served on. Who served with you? What did you discuss in particular?
Yes, it was a great panel that I was really honored and thankful to be on. I had some great co-panelists, so it was me as the policy director at FPA, but to my left was another one of our great national allies. Her name is Melissa McKay. She's the founding chair of the Digital Childhood Alliance, which is a coalition group that FPA is proud to be a part of on these issues. On my other side was Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principles Project, another great allied organization for social conservatism. Then we had also on the panels Louisiana State Representative Lori Schlegel, who, if you remember, Grace, she spoke at our summer conference last year. We had her on a panel to talk about these issues because she is the courageous legislator who first got the idea to use age verification software requirements to protect kids from pornography at state law. So she wrote the first state bill to protect kids with those requirements, got it passed in Louisiana. She's really the true innovator behind this idea. So she was a great voice to have there, and just a hero in this movement. Brilliant woman. And we were moderated, of course, by John Schweppe, who's a special policy assistant to the chairman of the FTC. We will link to the video to it in the show notes for anyone who wants to watch. The FTC has posted it, and we're thankful for that. But I will say, just very briefly, summarize some of my remarks for the questions John asked me. So the first thing I spoke about was just the typical arguments and opponents that oppose these kinds of policies, protecting kids online from pornography, from social media, and from predatory app stores. And the bottom line about the arguments that we often get is that adults have a First Amendment access to pornography, supposedly, and that parents should just parent more. Both of those are ultimately false flags, but usually the people that make those arguments don't even know that. So I know we're going to talk more about those in our counter arguments section of the show after the break. But I did enjoy getting to talk about the main opponents, the people behind these bills, because they need to be identified. The primary opponents to these bills are big tech, but also, which is obvious, but also large pornography companies, which are part and parcel of the broader what we call sex industry. That includes prostitution, sex trafficking, and also pornography. And I wanted to make clear to the audience that these are nefarious actors and they are not good dealers. They profit off people's misery and addiction. They revel in our brokenness and they make money off of it and then hide behind the barrier of free speech, a false flag, like I said. That needs to be reckoned with because they are very powerful and they are very badly motivated and they do not care who they hurt. So that was the first part of what I talked about. Next, John asked me just about the constitutionality of these bills. Is this constitutional? Since right now, according to Supreme Court precedent, adults do have a First Amendment right to access pornography. I want to start by saying I think those cases are wrongly decided, that the First Amendment does not grant adults that right. But that's a discussion for another time, which FPA will explore at a later date. But that is one of the objections, and I just spoke about how I think these bills are perfectly constitutional, even with that precedent, because as part of that precedent, the court has ruled in the past that states have a good interest, a legitimate state interest, in protecting kids from pornography exposure, and this is why if in the old days people used to consume pornography in print form, not online. The court has ruled that it's okay for states to require those stores to verify the age of the purchaser of print pornography. There's a case that we're waiting for at FPAF at the time of recording called Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton that will decide the fate of these age verification laws that we've been lobbying for. The ruling decision from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals basically applied that logic from that Supreme Court precedent that it's okay for it's okay for states to require pornography distributors to verify the age of their purchasers because the state has an interest in protecting kids from it. The Fifth Circuit ruled that online age verification is simply the digital version of in-person age verification, and actually it's less onerous, and that's why the law was upheld at the Fifth Circuit. I find that logic to be unassailable, and I hope the Supreme Court adopts it, and I think they will. So, at the time of recording, they haven't released the opinion yet from the Supreme Court. Hopefully, we'll get it. Those were the main things I spoke about, as well as just what happens next. Where do we go from here? And we talked about that a lot in terms of what does happen with Paxton if the court does not rule our way, and if it does. So I think either way, for one thing's for sure, the coalition that was in that group is so motivated to protect families and children because this price is so high. Our kids' innocence, their safety, their understanding of romance and intimacy is too important for us to just go away, even if the court gives us a setback. So we're moving forward with more of these laws, hopefully, and then also more of what we call the App Store Accountability Act. I can't take credit for that name. That was my friend and colleague, Melissa McKay, who was next to me on the panel. The App Store Accountability Act protects kids from being exploited on app stores, and it empowers parents to better protect their kids holistically on the internet. We'll talk about that more after the break. But that's where FPA and FPAF want to go forward, no matter what happens with Paxton. So we want to do more to protect kids from pornography. And we want to see App Store Accountability Acts passed throughout the states and the federal government to protect kids holistically online. No matter what the court does in Paxton, that's what we're doing because we're not going to be deterred. We're not going anywhere because the price for kids' safety is just too high.
Yeah, amen. Thank you so much for expanding on all of that. And I love the attitude that we have here that, we're not backing down on this. We're making sure that kids are protected. And I think that attitude is obviously very much needed. And that is very much here at FPA. So, or FPAF. So, anyway, we're going to go to a quick break and we'll be straight back to discuss some of the counter arguments in more detail.
It's clearly a danger, a clear and present danger to Americans of every age. Pornography is so ubiquitous. It's the most socially acceptable addiction there is, and that makes it arguably the most dangerous. The difference is we know from brain scans that it's as bad for you as heroin is. The difference is you don't have a First Amendment right to access heroin. So now that we know what we know about how harmful pornography is, it's indisputable now. The Supreme Court's got to circle the square here. They've got to figure out how they balance at least our notions of First Amendment rights with a government's most basic, most essential duty, which is to protect its citizens.
Welcome back to House to Home, everyone. Today, Grace and I are continuing our discussion of an event that FPA was invited to be a part of at the Federal Trade Commission the first week of June this year. At the time of recording, we're just a few days removed from the event, so the memory is fresh in my mind and in Grace's because she was watching online. And we wanted to finish our discussion of this event because I alluded to when talking about my remarks at the event that I was asked specifically about some of the arguments that are opposed to these good bills in the states and in the federal government designed to protect children and families online. So one of the arguments, or I would say the most prominent argument we get most often from at least big tech lobbyists who have been kind of new on the scene this year, but they have opposed us in pretty much every state. From Apple specifically, but pretty much all the big tech companies, they say that the obligations these bills impose upon them are really onerous and that they're ultimately not practical. And they like to say, at least they tell the world, they've already done a lot to protect children and families online. And the reality is that they have not. Apple puts their supposed safety solutions out there as a false flag, but really they're fake. They're ineffective. Our friends at the Digital Childhood Alliance have an excellent breakdown of that on their website, which I would encourage everybody to go to, and maybe we'll link into the show notes. But the bottom line is that from a safety standpoint, the kind of age verification requirements that the laws put into place are really not that onerous, and they're done usually by a third party, not even by Apple. It just shows that Apple doesn't want to comply with this, along with the other big tech companies, and particularly when it comes to the pornography bills, pornography companies do not want to comply because their business is based on underage users, which tells you a lot about that business. So it's ultimately a false argument designed just to deflect the blame. And as my colleague from DCA, Melissa McKay, is so fond of saying, all the pieces here are in place. We're just trying to put them together in the right alignment to better protect kids and families and get some oomph behind them, some actual state authority. So that's why that argument, usually if we can get a fair fight, it falls flat.
Yeah, 100%. I think when I was reading this counter argument, I was kind of thinking, I'm like, they build out such complex tech with all the AI capabilities and things that we have now. This is not a heavy lift for them. And I think it is exactly what you said. I mean, it's concerning that they don't really want to address this when you think especially about porn companies too, which, I mean, they have like zero heart to start off with, but even more so kids. Like that's like another whole topic, and I think that that is very concerning. And it's interesting. I know that in some European countries, there's far more legalization around prostitutism and all of that kind of thing. And the argument that people always make is like, oh, it will lessen it, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it puts sex trafficking through the roof. It is not good to be normalizing all of this. And so I think that it's definitely a wake-up call. And it's interesting because when I was doing a little bit of research around this, I came across an app called Kik. It's Kik. And it's an online social media app. And it's huge. I mean, they have like 300 million downloads. Most of their users are young people. And there are like zero protections on it. You don't even have to like tell the app who you are. So anyone can chat completely anonymously. A young kid could be talking to a pedophile. Like it's very, very unregulated, and there's just very little safety standards in place. I mean, they have no age verification on this app. And so I think when we consider cases like that, it's not like we're just making this stuff up. Like, this stuff is going on, and there are reports, as we covered in another episode on AI chatbots. That one might be coming out soon, actually, but we go into some more detail on specific cases where young people have been chatting with a chatbot, which, not even a person, an AI chatbot, and have then followed on to like commit suicide and awful things like that. And so I have even seen in my personal life someone that I grew up with as a friend of mine. I watched how online talking to the wrong people really had a very, very, very negative effect. And that definitely creates a personal hatred within me for it. But I definitely think that, it's just like anything else. Good business, obviously, businesses exist partly to make money, but not at the cost of human life and value. That would be now slavery, and it would be trafficking. So I think that those arguments are completely out of the water. It's like, should we just make food that's not good for us, which maybe half of American food isn't, but like, you don't purposely harm someone. That's wrong. So
Yeah, greed is a powerful motivator, isn't it, Grace? Because
yes.
you're right; these companies are so powerful, they're so smart, but there's such smart people behind them. I have another great ally in this fight, an expert on the software behind age verification, who loves to tell legislators, if American technology can put a man on the moon, then American technology can definitely verify the age of a user safely and privately.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that really goes a long way to simplifying the issue. It goes a long way toward dismantling that argument from the big businesses that are profiting right now off this danger to our kids.
Totally. I totally agree. I think it's really good putting that into perspective. So the other argument on this is that the argument is, okay, parents are just being lazy. They need to do a better job at parenting and protecting their kids. How would you respond to that, Joseph?
Yeah, I hear this argument a lot in the legislative cycle, particularly from parts of the right side of the aisle, which I'm not unempathetic to. Certainly, people on the right are a little bit more likely to hold libertarian tendencies, and so everybody knows I personally believe in the small government. I agree with that. But that's one of the things I loved about this event and the FTC's approach to it, is because on the very first panel at this event, one of the panelists was the mother of a child who did take his own life because of a lack of regulation in this sphere. It was a heartbreaking story, and there were numerous parents like her in the audience today. It was clear that the FTC made that a priority. It heard their cry. And to me, that it reinforces ultimately FPA's original reason for getting into this area of advocacy for families, is because this is a matter of parental rights and parental obligations. We believe parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children. And that includes, and they have the obligation, of course, to protect them. And all of that includes when and how kids learn about sex or deal with any strangers, either in person or online. And what we've learned through our research, and what the audience has heard us say on our show before, is that parents do not have the tools available to them right now to exercise that right and that duty in the digital age. And so the App Store Accountability Act, especially, it restores those duties to those parents. So right now, there is all app developers on the Apple App Store, Google Play Store, they are allowed to self-rate their apps. So these apps obviously have a business interest in trying to rate those apps for as low an age as possible to get the widest possible usage. But these apps can contain extreme violence, explicit sexuality. And as you pointed out, Grace, we have numerous examples of them connecting young people to adults that their parents don't know and haven't agreed to, or even pedophiles, as well as AI chatbots, which, as you said, we've covered in another episode, so we won't get into that now. But the point is, parents are clueless. They see an app that says, not clueless, I should say helpless, because they see an app that says 4 and up and they think it must be safe for my child, when in reality it's not. So the App Store Accountability Act would, for one thing, require accurate app ratings in the App Store. And it would also ensure that parents have the right to decide whether their kid downloads and uses any of these apps, because the app or the act, the App Store Accountability Act, says that kids cannot do this without parental consent. They can't download an app. And the big justification for that, that's so powerful from a legal and policy perspective, is because every time a user downloads an app, they are signing a contract. They are agreeing to a set of terms and conditions, which are usually numerous. They're very long. They're hard to read, and most adults don't read those. Let's face facts. There's no way a child is going to read those. And at the end of the day, kids cannot legally enter into contracts anyways because they're not of majority age. So this is clearly a predatory consumer relationship, and it's robbing parents of their rights and their ability to protect their kids. And that's how FPA got into it, as our Let Parents Parent campaign. So the last thing I'll say is that I'm a small government person too, like a lot of people. But our country does have a history of empowering its parents to protect its kids. That's in our history and tradition. And at times throughout our history, when parents have an obligation, they don't have the tools available to them to meet that obligation for their kids, the government has stepped up to provide them the tools they need. That is not big government or government expansion. That is government empowering parents to govern their own households. And we think that's a worthy objective.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think on an analogy kind of view, I think that, like, as a parent, when you're purchasing like children's toys, there will be warnings on them to say, okay, choking hazard. Does that mean that like the parent is irresponsible? Now, probably most parents anyway, you just have common sense of like, okay, this has small Lego pieces in it or whatever it is that you're buying for your child. You would have some kind of common sense as to whether or not that's appropriate. But those companies still have to put those warnings on there because that's just good practice. You are empowering parents. Maybe you're a first-time parent and you just didn't fully think about it. Or maybe you don't realize that this toy could break into smaller pieces or something like that, That is not government overreach. That is simply making sure that the consumer is cared for. Just like, even warnings of don't put a baby seat in the front in case the airbag pops. It's just things like that. You may not think of that off the top of your head because you're not thinking, okay, the airbag's going to go or something, So companies are making you aware, like, this could happen and this isn't a good idea to put your baby in the front. And so I just think that this is along those exact same lines of empowering parents. The government is supposed to be there to protect us. And this is part of the government protecting kids. And exactly what you said, actually enabling parents to have the knowledge that they need to then make the right choices for their kids. And I mean, even earlier, you talked about, there were laws that were enacted that if you're going to purchase pornography in like written material, you have to be age verified. Exact same thing with alcohol. Why is that the case? Partly because these things can and are dangerous or addictive. And it's exactly the same with this. Like, kids can be put in danger or get addicted to something online. Like, it's just common like sense that you would have a warning applied to that. And so I don't think, exactly as you said, I don't think the argument holds up at all. We're talking about two different things. This isn't government overreach. I, like you, am a proponent of small government, but I think that part of that is also just understanding why the government exists. The government doesn't exist to control your life or to just write you like endless checks for you to be able to live without working. That is not why the government is there. The government is there to protect you and empower you. And this, to me, falls into that category pretty perfectly. So, yeah.
It's well said, Grace. It's not immediately intuitive to a lot of people, particularly young parents, and we deal with a lot of parents who didn't come from good family homes. So, fortunately, you and I, Grace, we both have great parents. So when you and I become parents one day separately, we'll be able to tell we'll have a great and mentors in our lives who'll be able to help us see, well, this is what it's like to, these are things you have to look out for, because as a new parent, you're all over the place, you're stressed out. But for people who don't have that luxury, a lot of things about parenting aren't intuitive, and I think that's particularly true in the digital age. You see an app that's rated 4 and up, and you think it must be safe. Well, it's a little bit harder to find out whether that's true in digital age. Whereas if you're in Walmart and you're going to buy a Lego for your kid, it's pretty obvious when you pick it up and you carry it to the checkout that maybe there's some choking hazards in there. I should make sure my child's old enough for this. It's not the same online, and that means that the parents need government to just give them a little bit of extra help to make sure that they can fully protect their kids from one they wouldn't be reasonably expected to know about.
100%. I totally agree with that.
Well, this has been a good conversation, Grace, in light of this event we had this week. Again, FPA is really thankful to the Federal Trade Commission for inviting us to be a part of it. We think we belonged there, and we're going to carry forward this legislative success for more of it until our goal is to see every state pass both of these bills: a bill protecting kids from pornography online and a bill empowering parents to protect their kids on app stores, the App Store Accountability Act. So thank you to our audience for listening to this episode of House to Home. We will link to the video of that FTC event in our show notes. We'll make a note for at least when the panel that I participated in begins in the video. But if you like our show and you like this kind of analysis, you can get a lot more of it at FPA's social media at @family_policy on all the major platforms, including we have some tweets from this event this week that you can check out. And if you like the show, please hit that follow or subscribe button. Give us a good review. It really helps us. And until next week, I've been Joseph Kohm alongside Grace Youngson. We will see you again soon.